ado, let us kick off this extraordinary event with our first session of the day. We are delighted to begin today's discussions with a highly anticipated keynote address from the World Economic Forum, Rising Stronger, True Transformation and Future Resilience of the Chemical Industry. To deliver this address, we have with us an expert and an innovative thought leader in guiding strategic transformations in the chemical and advanced materials industries at a global scale. Please join me in welcoming Stefan Koch, head of the chemical and advanced materials industry at the World Economic Forum.
Merhaba and good morning all together. And on behalf of the World Economic Forum, thank you very much for your kind invitation into Oman, and I'm very pleased and privileged to be here and join your wonderful conference and to kick off day 3 together with you. I'd like to take you on a journey towards true transformation and future resilience of the chemical industry. And I truly believe it's very important that we jointly look into this, as we have rarely seen such a multi-layered disruption of the industry as of now. You might know the World Economic Forum. We are an international organization for public and private collaboration, and there we have divided the world economy into 22 industries. And at the World Economic Forum, I'm in charge of the global chemical industry, and I have the privilege to work with CEOs and strategy officers of large chemical companies to really address the most challenging topics they have on their agenda and we have on our Earth agenda going forward. I'm very glad to see some of the familiar faces here at the conference as well, with Jim Fitterling, Ilham Kadri yesterday, both part of our community, Abdurrahman Al-Faghi, part of my steering committee even, and I'm very glad that we have developed also this strong relationship with your region and the World Economic Forum and really designing a joint agenda. And the joint agenda is very much about where can we talk and discuss about the future of the industry, but also where do we need to walk together to go beyond the talk dimension. And I can tell you, before I joined the World Economic Forum, I have been in the private sector for 22 years overall and 10 years in the chemical sector. So I know where you are sitting and what you feel looking at the chemical industry at this point of time. And we have mixed feelings. We can clearly assess this. I realized in the positions I had working on large transformative programs that within a company you can push the boundaries, but quite often only to the limits of the system. And that's why I'm very privileged now with the World Economic Forum to really try to address those systemic challenges, not only through the lens of business, but really taking into consideration that we need to involve the public sector, that we need to bring the innovators, that we need to bring investors, that we need to bring social society into the debate. And this is exactly what we are doing. You might know the big Davos Forum in Switzerland in January, and I can tell you we are already in preparation for this event with very strong emphasis on transformation and resilience and rebuilding trust for the intelligent age. With this, I'd like to get us into this journey, and of course we will start with a view on geopolitics and geoeconomics and the impact on the global supply chains. Then I'd like to look with you into what I call personally the poisoned cocktail. These are all the ingredients, the challenges the chemical industry is facing globally, and I'll leave the stage with a quite optimistic view and outlook on the chemical industry in the future. And I want to give you 5 very concrete perspectives and recommendations on transformation and resilience. With this, let's get started on the geopolitics and geoeconomical side. And I think we can clearly say, looking at 2024, it has been a very special year. 2024, looking on the conflict side, we're very much, of course, looking into Ukraine, Russia. We're looking at Gaza intensively and the potential ripple effects into the regions. But let's be aware of the fact that while I'm standing here, we have globally around 50 conflicts, partially armed, and some very severe tensions as well. 2024 has been the year of elections. Let's remind us it started in India with the largest democratic election ever seen in history. We have seen elections in Mexico. 400 million people went to vote in Europe. And last but not least, the US elections, which brought a new administration in place. And we're very curious to see what will this mean in terms of real action beyond the level of talk. Definitely, it will have impact on the policies and how they will be designed going forward. So it's a moment where we need also to await the policy responses of various countries going forward. If we stay with US at the interface to China, we can refer to the fact that there has been a kind of a trade war since 2018 already, with tariffs put in place on both sides, and really a strong ambition to get independent and decouple even the industries from each other. When we look into your beautiful region, and I personally can say I'm a very big fan and feel very much welcomed by you here. Second time for me to be in Oman. Looking through a Western perspective, I have also to say there is a certain level of instability, but I also learned you are used to this for quite some decades already. But from a global market perspective, we see, of course, the impacts on the markets when you look at oil price fluctuations as an example. Despite this instability, we are seeing very strong foreign direct investments into the regions, which is very much encouraging, very convincing also yesterday to see how you drive collaboration with international partners. And it remains a geographic hub of such an importance for the global chemical industry going forward. Looking at India, I have to say it's quite promising. And I can tell you I was around 10 years in the finance sector, and we have been always asking us, when is the time for India? I personally think it's now. If you see that there have happened some structural changes in terms also of policy development, you see an underlying domestic demand fueling the high growth numbers we see in India of around 6 to 7% at this point of time. At the same time, very strong ambitions of India to become the manufacturing hub of the world and even to become the 6th largest chemical producer globally. Looking at Europe, we have to acknowledge that we see quite a fragmentation at this point of time. The two largest economies in Europe, with France and Germany, are facing some political challenges at this point of time. We have new elections just coming up in Germany beginning next year. And this marks a challenge for the 27 countries to really align on fundamentally necessary industry policies going forward. All those geopolitical and economic developments with its impact on the global supply chains are quite severe at this point of time. And in addition, transportation logistics are having additional challenges. If you look, for example, at the consequences still of COVID-19, if you look at extreme weather events, if you look at resource scarcities as well. And the response, and I clearly see this talking to the CEOs and strategy officers, is that we are getting away from this year-long cost optimization only in global markets and supply chains up to much more resilience. And this is really anchored in nearshoring, in supplier diversification, and really building more sufficiency in regions and regional hubs. Independent of any geographic boundaries, climate change still as a high-pressuring topic on us with a lot of consequences, and I guess we're well aware of the societal and environmental ones, but if you look into the economic consequences alone, it's very severe. IPCC has made some forecasts that global GDP might be impacted negatively at a range of 1 to up to 10%, depending on the temperature level we are aiming at. At the same time, when you look into the ambitions the nations have, we see differences. And again, here in Europe, in Germany, we are aiming for climate neutrality 2045. Europe as a whole 2050, US under the Biden administration 2050, although I expect that Trump administration will step down from the Paris Agreement. We see Oman 2050, but then really looking into China 2060, India 2070. So if you're a global player and a global company, it remains quite a challenging environment to navigate through those different ambitions and resulting policies. Looking at risks, we have done a very well-perceived global risk report at the World Economic Forum, and we have asked 1,200 experts from our network, CEOs, heads of state, ministers, academia, NGOs, investors, about their perception of risks in the future. And when you look into the 2 years outlook, you see quite a bunch of mixed risks with misinformation and disinformation at the top. Well, when you look into the 10 years outlook, we clearly see that the environmental risks are dominating and having respective impact on, finally, also the businesses we and you are doing. Looking at growth, I think we can say in 2024, globally, GDP around 3%, IFM is with 3.2, World Bank a little bit more conservative with 2.7%, also with their outlook for 2025. Cautiously optimistic, I have to say. Very positive, the strong recovery on the foreign direct investments we have seen since 2021, with very intensive flows, financial flows into digitalization and green technologies. Talking about growth, we need to apply a GDP plus perspective going forward. And that's why I'm bringing in the CO2 price here as an example, where we need to incorporate CO2 and its pricing into our economic models, into ultimately your investment planning in your company as well, which is a challenge given the different price levels we see, as we don't have a globally unified working CO2 price scheme. You see Europe currently at 68 US dollars, US half of it, and for very long we have seen China below 10 US dollars, now slightly above. We're expecting, due to further societal pressure and evolvement of climate change, higher prices going forward. With this, I think we have a well-set understanding of geoeconomics following the geopolitical trends, and I would like to pull us into what I call the poison cocktail. This is not what we had probably at the bar after a wonderful evening last night, but it really describes the challenges the chemical industry is facing from a global perspective. And I say this talking to the company representatives, talking to other stakeholders out of the World Economic Forum's perspective, but also with my own experiences being in the sector, having worked for Covestro and Bayer for 10 years. We start with a lower demand than expected. This is very clear and very severe, especially in the high growth markets in Asia, leading quite often for some players in the market to less utilization of their capacities, resulting higher costs. And with this, we have a cost challenge as we need to incorporate further CO2 also into our cost models going forward. The European players especially have faced additional cost challenges on the energy side caused by Russia-Ukraine conflict, as you are all aware. When we look into the oversupply situation, also here very interesting, at least from my perspective, 2027, 2028. Currently we have an oversupply in the base chemicals, in all major ones. If you take ethylene, for example, with a global capacity of production of 200 million metric tons versus demand of 175, 180 million metric tons. Having an oversupply rate of rarely seen in the past, 8 to up to 15% in the base chemicals. And we see ambitions also, especially from the Chinese players, to grow further into the base chemicals as well, and therefore opportunities to create similar pictures there. This all results in mixed profitability depending on where you are in the chemical value chain and, of course, in which region you are acting. The overall high interest rates have created quite a challenge on the investment side. When you look at 2024 only, it's estimated that we talk about 20 to 25% of planned capex projects in the chemical industry globally, which have not been realized or delayed, partially, completely cancelled. So that's quite a number following all the challenges we have seen. And when we look into what the market could deliver at all our attractive downstream industries, we see a growing green market development. I would expect that many of you in the room, and at least in my community, almost all of the companies are selling lower CO2 products and partially circular products into downstream markets. We are realizing partially higher prices, but the green premium as a systemic one has not yet evolved so far. So also here, in creating that market pull is quite an important view we have to take, and I can tell you we're doing this at the World Economic Forum systemically. We face, as the chemical industry, supply chain risks. I was referring to the fact that we need to see how the policy environment is developing going forward, following all the new administrations we have in place. And it's very interesting from my perspective as well to look at the investors. So how will the investors respond in 2025 on the chemical industry, as they are watching not only on the industry, but at their whole portfolio opportunities. And they are comparing, of course, the chemical industry with other hard-to-abate industries. Last but not least, we have a huge transformational need in the chemical industry. Let's make us aware again of the fact that the chemical industry is still causing 5 to 6% of global CO2 emissions. And we are decarbonizing, if we want to use that term at all in the chemical industry, at a very low pace in comparison to the other industries. If we go a little bit deeper, we have done at the World Economic Forum a very well perceived energy transition index, which is looking at countries and their energy transition performance, but also their readiness. And when you look at 120 countries globally assessing this, we can say that the energy transition is evolving. It's evolving despite the fact that we have so many critical views on the pace, but it is strongly progressing. It has lost a bit of momentum in 2024 also, we have to acknowledge. European countries still in a leading position, but the others developing strongly, and we are looking at the readiness. So is a country ready to really embark further on the energy transition? Do we have the structural underlying policies? Do we have the finance and the capital market support in the respective regions? We have quite an optimistic view identified in the study globally. If you go deeper into manufacturing power, which is influencing the positions the companies are in from a global lens, you see, for example, looking at clean tech, very interesting from my point of view, this study from Bloomberg here, that solar PV, wind turbine, electric vehicle battery components, and even the hydrogen electrolyzers are at a range of 60 to 80% manufacturing capacity in Asia, with China dominating. And we've seen a lot of invention in other areas of this world, but the real scale up was made on those technologies in China and Asia. With this, looking again deeper into the investment environments and looking at the countries and what's the level of support we are seeing there for investments going forward. And you see on the left with US, a quite perceived supporting and even incentivizing corporate governmental guidance on corporate action here through the Inflation Reduction Act. If you look at China, quite top-down regulated and quite intensively looking at centrally described and defined capacity planning, including their ability to fast execute. If you look at India, more and more structural policies in place in their China Plus One strategy and their very strong ambition based on their growth momentum also to grow into the global chemical markets intensively. With MENA, very clearly also additional structural changes. We have seen policies in place and very strong support from the governments and the oil and gas transformation itself, and with many of you players here playing a very important role in growing further into the chemical value chains and make the interface of oil and gas as well as the chemical sector more blurring. When we look at Europe, we can see that there is no central governed industrial deal at this point of time, although we have seen the Green Deal, which has been really seen for very long as the role model for sustainable transformation. With the new EU Commission coming in, I'm slightly optimistic that there will be an increased focus really on industrial competitiveness going forward. That's the cocktail, and quite hard to digest for the one or other, again, depending on where you are in the value chain and in which region you're acting. I want to draw our attention on the opportunities, because I feel this is a unique moment as well when you think about the history of hundreds of years of the chemical industries, where it was very much about capacity building, following the demand signals in the markets, a bit of technology advancement, but at this point of time, a lot of drivers come into place, which makes this moment quite unique, and very wise decisions are required by you as leaders going forward. So let's apply that optimistic view, and we can do it for very good reasons. Looking, for example, at the growth outlook, we're still talking about an above GDP industry going forward, with doubling the demand for petrochemicals until 2050 and the required value contribution through all of you on the way there. When you look at the investments and the annual investments into the chemical business on the asset side, very, very massive, and also here expected higher investments on China and Asian side, but I'm also very much convinced through the investment power of the MENA region, as I have well experienced the past 2 days in exchange with you. Interestingly, and very importantly, looking at the growth opportunities we see on the sustainable product side, bringing products with lower CO2 footprint into the markets, bringing products with alternative feedstock into your downstream industries, and we're seeing attractive growth and margin opportunities here going forward. That might result in a picture looking at 10 years from now on the chemical industry, where we see definitely different growth drivers have developed over time, with again significant power and push from China and the Asian markets, but with a fundamental role artificial intelligence is playing and bringing into the game, as we also heard yesterday, and as I will zoom into a bit further in a minute from now as well. We also see, given the geopolitical and geoeconomic situation we are in, that there will be a strong orientation on regional hubs, an ambition and a desire to ensure self-sufficiency and really get independent from the global trade mechanisms only. When you look at consolidation, I think we have seen already quite some consolidation in some of the areas of the chemical industry, industrial gases as an example. I see huge potential still on the petrochemical side as well as on the specialty chemical side. Just seen ADNOC with their offer to take over Covestro as one of the very concrete recent examples, and expecting that this will continue in the years to come. There might be, and this is from my point of view not yet clear, even a sector divide, so that we have on the one side companies heavily focusing on the fossil routes, where others put high bets on sustainable feedstock routes. It might even go in a direction that we see, on the one hand, the material players which are heavily depending on energy and aiming to reduce CO2, whereas you have on the other side more the functional players heavily impacted by upcoming regulation and the consumer preferences they are facing. This is the community of my partners and the chemical industry companies I'm working with, and I'm really honored and privileged, I have to say, to work with the CEOs and strategy officers on their pressing topics, but also on globally relevant topics which get a systemic dimension in it we need to address jointly. And this is why the companies have joined the World Economic Forum, to seek for that platform of exchange, but also collaboration, and to work along those industry priorities which we have set for 2024 and 2025. And it starts, of course, with strengthening resilience, as this is important at this point of time. And this means, for example, that we are looking at how do we navigate through the given geopolitical and geoeconomic environment in exchange among CEOs and strategy officers and other C-suite representatives, but also that we are building opportunities to exchange with CEOs of the other 21 industries we have at the World Economic Forum. Secondly, we're looking into sustainable transformation. And there are questions in the room of, do we need to pause given the challenges we have? Do we need to accelerate given the huge transformational need we have in the industry? And we are seeking for alignment opportunities and creating coalition of willing partners among the industries. Third, a focus on how do we stay innovative, productive, and profitable. And I can tell you, artificial intelligence has really evolved as a key focus area here, where I'm working intensively with the company representatives, and we are assessing the opportunities of AI on R&D, on process efficiency, but even is there kind of any imagination for new business models resulting from this going forward. Last but not least, the systemic role of the industry, and how can we really ensure that there is a broad understanding of the value contribution of the industry in wider society. I promised you that I leave the stage with 5 very clear recommendations, and I'm getting into it, and I'm starting with AI again. I clearly recommend to radically innovate and use AI, and I wisely use the term of radically here because I believe the time when we have spent 1 to 2% of our revenues into R&D are over. It will not be enough to master the integration of digital AI as well as the required CO2 reduction and circularity efforts into your R&D efforts. It requires more investment on that side. And I truly believe, looking at very concrete company examples of companies having looked at AI, that there's a huge opportunity on new material side. And having said this, I'm expecting that even new entries will be seen coming into the markets who are using their data understanding and data modeling opportunities and connected to the core of the chemical industry. Second, build a very strong, I call it net zero 2049 agenda. And why do I say 2049? Because I believe that we are still going as a society in the next 2-3 decades into 2050, and I want to give you the competitive advantage to be faster than your peers, therefore the 2049. And that enhances looking at climate strategies. I think every company should have a solid climate strategy looking into a 2050 outlook, but having a 2035 in-between target. Every company should look into having at least the scope 1 and 2 target, and the more you are downstream oriented in the value chain, you need to look into scope 3 going forward. I'm very clear that also having worked with the investors intensively at Bayer and Covestro, that there is a growing demand on that end going forward. Third, gain a competitive advantage in circularity. I really feel that we need to further bend the linear value chain, which we have highly optimized. Think about the brain power which went into highly optimizing the linear value chain of the chemical industry over the past 50 years. Amazing. Now it's really about looking into how can we bend it further and close the carbon loop over time. You're not only addressing the end of life topic, which is severe and very important for all of us, you're also looking into opportunities to diversify the feedstock base for very long-term future. Fourth, make the value of this industry clear to wider society, to investors, to even our customers in a better extent, about what we are doing in transforming those industries, really becoming the enabler for the downstream industries transformation. And that might start with also acknowledge some failures of the past to regain credibility. When I talk to people on the street, they say, chemical industry, too complex, too diverse, and honestly, we don't believe what they say. Yeah? So we need to get out of that and really create credibility, and we do this through honest commitments we make and better explaining the narrative and showcase also the collaborative power and the connection opportunities to our downstream industries. Start with the energy transition, I would very strongly advise. Last but not least, and that's kind of my personal call to every one of you here in the call, I think it's time to be ready for very personal, bold decision making, as this is important at a time of uncertainty. Really rethink what is your leadership approach, what are the core fundamental values of your individual leadership you're taking, be it as a CEO, be it as a manager in your company, be it as a father, be it as a mother, be it as a neighbor, as a representative of society, and really regain this leadership power and use it wisely. I think this is something which is urgently required at a time when we see so many unclarities, uncertainties on the global agenda. Very concretely, you could become, for example, 10% more risk-taking. Imagine if everyone in this room would be just 10% more risk-taking. You wouldn't hurt your business, you wouldn't risk anything, but we would accelerate jointly. So you might take that into consideration in your next board meeting. I leave you with these conclusions, and I thank you very much. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you and connecting if we see each other for the first time today, and wish you a wonderful day, and I'm very much looking forward on the discussions coming now, and see you very soon. Shukran.